Hey card fighters, if you watched the stream, we were introduced today to one amazing card. So let's talk about it.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Last week we were introduced to Nouvelle and his 2 support cards, and today we were introduced to Expultate the Blaster and his 1 support card, and we also knew about Xenon. And this is a little bit different than what we expected when we were introduced to Nouvelle, because that card was, the most opinion on the community was that it was not a good card, that it won't have a place in the meta deck, and it's just not a defining card for Kagero. I, on the other hand, find it a very good card. It opens up a lot of different options to play Kagero, and I like the way that they don't always make the new VR the new big finisher of the deck, because they don't have to power creep every turn with the new set, but it was a good card. But now we're introduced to Expedite the Blaster, the other side of this set, with the other grade 4, and well, although it's not really a new end game finisher card for that, it's an step up on the current deck, but it's a finisher for its own deck. But let's get into these cards, because we have Xenon, Benon and Expedite Blaster to talk about. Just like the Nouvelle cards, I will show you the translation of the skill on the screen with the cards, and I will give you my opinion on the card. Alright, we were already introduced to Xenon quite a couple of weeks ago when we were introduced with some Baku, with its skill. And it's basically the same old skill that we're used to in the very old version of Xenon. And all that card and this card, I actually don't like the way that skill is designed, and I don't like the card at all. It has an increase in base power, so it's now playable because of its base power, but its skill is too RNG to make it even remotely viable. Granted, I like RNG kind of cards, and I would hope that it will do more of these kinds of effects, but this card is just too inconsistent, and there's no way to increase the chances of succeeding this card. If it was an Oracle Think Tank, then it would be a great card, because you could basically force the luck a little bit by checking the top cards or not. But Royal Paladin cannot do that, so it's actually a pretty terrible card, and I don't think anybody's going to run it. Maybe in a budget deck, or maybe just somebody wants to deck it in, because the only upside to this card is that the fact that you can rewrite the grade 3 to get an extra force marker out of it. But that's all. Alright, next up we have Sage of Salvation Benon. And this is basically the Royal Paladin version of the grade 2 that they got by switching their grade 4 for a grade 3. For Kagero, it was that they could switch it out for Dragonic Overlord, but for Royal Paladin, surprise surprise, it's for Alfred Early. I wouldn't have guessed that it was Alfred Early actually, but it makes sense because they're both the grade 3 of the trial deck, but I will come in that later when we're going to discuss about Expediting the Blaster, that it's a little bit awkward with the skills, how they work, but granted, they need to have this kind of skill to be able to fetch their grade 3s, because if you have only the grade 4s in hand, and you're sitting on a grade 2 and you don't have a grade 3, you're basically screwed because you can't do anything. So this is basically a mandatory card to have in the clan, if you want to run the grade 4. So it's a fine card. I think people are going to run it if they're going to run the Expultate the Blaster, because you need the consistency to be able to get your grade 3s and go back to grade 4s, because Expultate the Blaster is one of the cards that you can rewrite back to it. So let's talk about that card now, alright? Alright, Expultate the Blaster. He gets 2 different skills, but before we're going to talk about the skill, look at the base power. It's a 14k base power. A lot of people already predicted it, because the original one was a 12k base and Nouvelle was a 13. Nouvelle, I just remember that I keep saying that name wrong. Nouvelle. That Nouvelle was a 13k base, so there was a 1k difference. So we see it with these grade 4s also 14k, 15k. So it makes a lot of sense that they did it, but then again, it's a Force clan, so if extra clans will gain grade 4s, and maybe they will, maybe they don't, I don't actually think that, but it can happen, then maybe they will also hit 14k. So that's interesting to see that. But let's go into the actual fancy stuff of this card, and that's the 2 skills that it has. Alright, one is when placed cost, so you may pay this cost when placed, counts as 1, choose a card from your soul and put all the other cards from your soul into the drop zone. And when this unit attacks during this turn, this unit battles all of your opponents in one attack. So it's basically a field attacker for the cost of all your soul except for one card. And that's very important for that one card, because its second skill is, at the end of the battle, so this is an auto skill that's mandatory at the end of the battle, that its unit attacked, no matter if the Vanguard or not, put 2 cards from your hand into the soul, retire this unit, and ride a Blaster Blade from your soul as stand. If you could not ride, you lose. So you need to have a Blaster Blade in your soul to be able to survive this turn, because if you're riding this thing, then you must attack. Or basically, when you attack, you must resolve the skill, and you need to have a Blaster Blade in your soul. Alright, there are 2 ways to combat this. You can use this first skill and you already have a Blaster Blade in your soul, so you keep it in your soul, or you have one in hand, or you luckily drive check one, and then put it into the soul with his second skill, and then you rewrite it as stand. What this means is that it is basically a mini version of next stage, because you can then attack again with Blaster Blade, because it's right as stand into the battle phase. So you have another Vanguard attack. So you lose your 2 cards from your drive check, but then you get a single drive again, so you have a -1 on a grade 3 turn, and you're sitting at your grade 2 again, but you have an extra attack out of it, and next turn you can rewrite again to your grade 3s, and you have also all your force markers you gain, so there's a lot of pluses you make. And there's only the downside that at the end of the turn, when you put out this enormous pressure, you then have the backlash that you're basically run out of energy, you're back to grade 2, you need to survive this turn to go back to grade 3 again. So it's balanced in that if you do not finish your opponent, they can basically hammer down on you because you're now back to a grade 2 again, your 10k Blaster Blade. But think about it, we ride back to Blaster Blade. So that means we can have his second skill again, that his first skill, that you have a crit on your second attack. And like if you have seen my Royal Paladin deck profile, link on top, then I would basically run with Wingle. And you have Wingle behind the Vanguard, then you attack with the Vanguard, don't boost, then put the 2, if you get 2 triggers, all on Wingle, the power, and then you have basically your second attack would become, on his base, a 23k attack with a crit, and if you have 2 triggers, it will become a 43k attack with a crit. So if they don't have a PG, that second attack would most likely kill them. And you also have that 1 single drive check again. So there's a lot of offensive capability to this card, but it's balanced to the fact that, unlike Nouvelle, we don't have a grade 1 that can fetch this grade 4. So you need to draw it. And it also works with a lot of the soul. So I don't think that this card will be functioning with Soul Saver in a deck. So that's why I also, that's why the reason why I uploaded my Soul Saver deck profile, I believe last week or this week, not too long ago, because I had a hunch that the grade 4, just like in Kagero, would not function with the current deck that we're used to. You can, but because they both rely on the soul, and the chance that you have Blaster Blade in the soul is not always that high, and you want to keep it in the soul because of Expultate, then I think it's a little bit too risky to combine the 2. So I think that the new deck with Expultate, if that's going to be a meta deck, and I most definitely think it would, because that multi-attack is very strong, then it will be most likely on Alfred early and King of Knights of Alfred. But then again, I don't think a lot of people will use Alfred early skill, because the way that I think it's clunky with the grade 2, that you can search it, is because its skill will call the Blaster Blade from soul to the rearguard. So you remove a Blaster Blade from your soul, or on your hand depending, but you're most likely, if you want to use Alfred early skill as good as possible, you want to call it from the soul, because then it's a +2. But, so that's a little bit clunky in that regard. But it works well, because if you write into the grade 4, then you go back to grade 2 and you don't have a grade 3 in hand, but you have the Expultate in hand, then you can use the grade 2 to fetch the grade 3. So there are some options, so you can link again, so you can write immediately back to grade 3, then the 4, then the 2, then the 3, then the 4, and you can keep repeating the cycle. Granted, I don't think you're going to do it more than 2 times in the game, so you can say, alright, I'm gonna run 2 Expultate, or you can run 4. It depends on what the consistency, how good it is, because there's no way to fetch it from deck, so you need to draw it. So, depending on the situation, you're going to play a game on Alfred early and King of Knights and Alfred. And that's really not that bad, because as stated in my deck profile on Royal Paladin, King of Knights of Alfred is a good pressure card that keeps forcing your opponent a lot to deal with. And Soul Saver is basically just a finishing turn. Well, Expultate the Blaster is basically the same. So, depending on the situation, World Paladin can differ in their playstyle with this card. Because we're used to putting our force markers all over the field. Well, with this card, maybe putting force markers on the Vanguard a couple of times is not a bad idea. Because you attack 2 times with the Vanguard and 1 potentially with a crit. So, those are some interesting things that these new cards will bring to the table. And I think World Paladin becomes a lot more interesting to fight against and fight with, because there are a lot of more diversity in place and how they can function. Because at the beginning of the game, when we ride to grade 2 and when we ride to grade 3, we don't actually gonna see that much which kind of Royal Paladin deck they're going to play. Because it can be a Soul Saver deck, it can be a Blaster, the Expultate the Blaster deck. It depends on what kind of grade 1s and 2s they run, that they can give a signal away. Because if they run the Venom, then it's quite obvious. But there's also one different thing, because we don't rely on Soul Saver, we can put more aggressive cards that use Soul Blast as a resource for their skills. Because we don't have to save our soul anymore. The only thing that you need to keep in your soul is Blaster Blade. That's everything you need. So, that's pretty good actually. So, depending on how it's going to function and how things will work out and with new supports going on, I think World Paladin has a good base for 2 new decks. We have the Alfred Expultate deck and the Soul Saver focus around Soul Saver deck. So, those are interesting things. And I'm very hyped for the mini booster when we finally will get it in English, because we still need to wait for AL4. So I have enough time to play with Pale Moon and Dark Regular. So yeah, let me guys what you think. I personally am very happy with Expediting the Blessing, how it works out. It's a very strong card, but it's balanced in a lot of ways, because it can screw you over if you're not careful. And there's a backlash to gaining a lot of power. And I hope they will keep this trend with strong effects that will have a backlash at the end of the effect. At the end of your turn. Because back to grade 2 is very painful. And it makes this card very balanced, because you attack their entire field, attack twice, have an extra force mark, and all those kinds of shenanigans. So, I'm very curious what you guys think. So, yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel, share the videos, and all those good stuff. And yeah, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys tomorrow in my Pale Moon set review of AL4. So, check you later guys.